Okay, I just want, before we get started, verify, um, Sam in our chat, could you give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Ah, look, you can speak. That's awesome. All right, cool. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Supernaut. Welcome to ProLink's quarterly training. This time of year, we're doing our HUD export utility training. This should be a refresher for most of you. This could be a new thing for some of our newer agencies. We are going to have a few questions through Zoom. We're going to have a few poll questions. We might have one pop quiz as we go through this training. We will have someone handling Q&A behind the scenes. So if you have any questions, you can pop those in the Q&A chat. And the quite capable Superwoman Kelly Encinius will be helping us with that. And we also have Sam and Alexis, our marketing geniuses behind the scenes, helping me and feeding me information. We will be taking a little break halfway through. So let's go ahead and get started. I am Sarah Supernaw. Most of you I've met and worked with before. I do these trainings every year, try to keep it going. So in case you forget how HUD export works over the years, since we all only do this once a year, we just want to kind of get back in and, oh, okay, well, how does this work again? I even had to go through that a little bit myself this year. And any changes that we have coming, because, if anything with HUD, things are going to change. I've been at ProLink for a little over 16 years and currently working with training and implementations and occasionally have a side gig as Q&A when needed. So this is what we are going to be talking about today. A lot of this is very similar to information that we have gone over in previous years, but we are going to tell you what's new, and I might go in the system and go over a few things too. We'll talk about the actual utility, what it does for those of you who may not know, where your data that you report on lives in ProLink. Then we'll take a quick break, talk about creating the files, and then how to resolve some of the errors that you might get when you upload to the HUD portal. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So let's talk about the HUD export utility overview. This is kind of the steps that we take in order to provide the data to HUD and everything you need to do before you get into the utility. We have an option to review your HUD data collection fields and then verify that your settings are configured correctly for your environment and your agency. If we've, once we've implemented, these are things that we set up when you go live. So it shouldn't be something you have to do, but who knows if gremlins might get in the system and we have to make some updates. There are errors that can alert you to that you might need to update some things, and we'll cover those. What the HUD export utility looks like in ProLinkHFA, your required fields and export history, and just actually creating the files through the HUD export. So we have our first poll question here, and Sam has popped that up. We'll give you about 30 seconds. What is your current comfort level with using the ProLinkHFA HUD export utility? Very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, not comfortable. I have never used the HUD export utility, also a valid answer. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer those questions. Again, I have failed in providing Jeopardy music while we wait for everyone to get their poll questions in. I apologize. I will put that on the list for next year. Sam, I feel like that's been 30 seconds or close to. And here are our results. Oh, 69% of you have never used the HUD export utility. Oh boy. And we have some who are very comfortable, yay, and somewhat comfortable. I do know from looking at the HUD portal, we do have one agency who looks like they may have already uploaded their stuff for the year. So good job there. I won't call you out in case you don't want us to. So thank you all for taking this poll. And now let us move on to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about what is new with the HUD export this year. A lot of this information shows up in your release notes throughout the year. And it's hard, like in January, when you see there's been an update to the HUD export process to care about it. But we've gone back and kind of here's everything that we have that's new. Um, so one of the items we have is on the HUD export project tab, which we're going to look at here in a minute. We are going to have the elected income ceiling for low income units percent AMGI field that's going to report in there. One of the changes we made on the HUD export page where you can enter data yourself is we're going to have a 8-digit limit on the FHA loan number if that is something you utilize or populate during your HUD data collection process. We've added a new value to the tax exempt allocation type on the TCA deal current stage. And you see these little bits and pieces in here. I've kind of pulled out some of the XML to show you the data points. Most of the time, most of you aren't going to look at the XML. You're going to be like, I hope it populated correctly, and you're going to zip it up to HUD. But if you are interested or, a glutton for punishment and enjoy looking at XML, this is kind of how the data gets translated to HUD. So type 3 is going to be what the tax exempt allocation type is. We also have the elected income ceiling for low income units percentage populating the project data file. The tenant data file, whole bunch of cool stuff in here. I think that the big one that some people are concerned about, we've added the option for a middle initial. So if any of your tenants have a middle initial, it's going to show up. If you don't have a middle initial, that's fine. But if you do, it's going to be in there now. We now have a relationship type of C when it's a pending unborn baby or pending adoption, and an F when it's a pending foster. So these are just things that came out that we updated for specific to all your tenant indicator data. We also have the source of federal rent assistance populating, and these are what they will look like when you see like the rent section of the XML. This comes out of your tenant events. So depending on what was entered on your tenant event is going to be how that populates. One of the big changes we've made is if you have pre-program review selected on a LIHTC program, and let's say your program doesn't start until 2025, but you've started collecting tenant events for whatever reason. Those tenant events during the collection year are not going to be populating the tenant file when you have that allow pre-program review checkbox selected. The missing data file will still be populated for any missing data for that property, just, I guess, so you can get ahead. We've also had some increases in maximum values for a lot of data on the tenant events that show up in the tenant data file. Used to be the max was 4,000. Now it's increased to 8,000, which I don't know what you would charge somebody 8,000 a month for a unit, but whatever. I'm not sure why these changes were made. I haven't been able to track that down, but those will be increases. Now, some of the stuff will get caught during compliance evaluations. If it's like a LIHTC unit, you've exceeded the maximum income limit or rent limit, you're still going to get those exceptions and be able to correct it. But for whatever purpose, HUD's going to allow these values. Same thing for annual household income from all sources was increased from 300,000 to 600,000. And now you can put negative values in some of these. I would love for someone to tell me why you would have negative values in these fields. I don't understand that from a asset manager perspective, but that is now allowed. And the data files won't yell at you when you have values in between these negative 2,000 and 8,000. Another one, we've made some changes to the rent limits. Let's see, rent assistance, federal rent assistance, and maximum rent limit for this unit. These are showing up here in your rent section of the XML and the tenant data file. And then when you have like your average income designations, we have values to show what those are going to look like in the HUD file. The other thing, same thing, household meets income restriction with the BEN and average income values. Like if the AIT unit designation is 20, it's going to show a 1, etc. So I've kind of highlighted this here. Like this one would be 60%, this one would be 50%, and this one would be 20%. So the current income limit per family size equal the value from the tenant event LIHTC max income limit field. That's kind of where that comes from. So now we're going to have another poll question. Does your agency utilize the HUD export page on portfolio property to verify data before running the HUD export utility and or to resolve missing information? So we'll open this up for 30 seconds. Please answer, and then we'll wait for Sam to show us our poll results. Okay, I think that has been about 30 seconds. Ah, yes, some of you do. And the ones, see, okay, now we have 43% who don't know what the HUD export page on portfolio property is, which is a nice segue into that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so in order to look at the HUD data collection fields on a portfolio property, you must mark the HUD LIHTC data collection box on your Edit AM characteristics screen for your property. If you do not have this selected and you haven't saved it, you're not going to see this little thing right here, the HUD export page, right? Another thing is this does not mark the property for HUD reporting. I want to be very clear. This just allows you to look at the data. Your properties are going to be reported to HUD based on the LIHTC program being active. I don't think it doesn't care about home. It doesn't care about your state programs and your additional set-asides. If you have an active LIHTC program during the collection year that is active, then our system will report on that. So once you've gone here to click on this, it's going to show all the information. You will see this enabled because if you go into a property right now, you're like, well, I don't see that HUD export thing. That's because you have to go into AM characteristics and select that box. Then you can view it. Just if you get missing data validations, you're like, I don't know where to find that field. There's a way to find that out in here, which is actually really cool. So when you go to the HUD export and you hover over some of these fields, it's going to kind of tell you exactly where to find that, the screen, the location, how you can update if it's missing. Because you do want to report on as much as this as possible to HUD because I think they appreciate that. Like here, type new construction, where does that come from? TCA current stage. That's the one we added both new construction and app rehab to. And then like total units, where does that come from? Because some of these come from different places. Total units will come from property, but your low income units is going to come from your TCA deal. So I want to bring this up really quick, which I'm going to guess that I probably have already timed out and I'll come back. But if you do have, and this is kind of the big thing, it's like I went through this earlier when I was going through training for this. I had some data and I'm like, I don't know why my HUD export screen is not showing any data at all. I could not figure it out. It was because on the associated TCA deal, I did not have this box checked. So I felt very silly because if I had done my own training before I tried to update the training, then I would have realized that's what was missing. So our product team helped me out to figure out what I was missing there. So if you've done everything you possibly can think of and you don't know why your property screen is not showing any data, you got to make sure that this is selected over here on your TCA deal. So this is kind of one of my properties that I have that has a lot of information, but not everything on it. And this is the information, the extended information that you can add if you want to, based on your property to report to HUD. This is data that we don't necessarily collect programmatically in the system. But here again, you can hover over these and see. I feel like I should make this bigger because I don't think any of our eyes are getting any younger. Like this shows you how many bedrooms on this property have 2. Does the LIHTC have a nonprofit sponsor? And it is really helpful to hover over this and be like, I know exactly where this field is going to come from. So when you get stuck with your missing data and you go to your HUD export page and try to figure out where that missing data is coming from, this is kind of one of your new best friends. And same thing for the no longer monitored stuff as well. So we have that for you. And that is what the HUD export information page is, and reviewing the HUD data collection fields. Now, throughout the system, you might see once you have like, let me rephrase that. On a property, when you have the HUD LIHTC data collection box selected on AM characteristics, you might see these little orange ribbons pop up. That's basically indicating, HUD's going to need this information. It doesn't show that for every single field that we collect for HUD data, but it will show it for some. So if you see the little orange ribbons, don't panic. That just means that's HUD data. One of the other things you need to make sure that you have completed is your HUD allocating agency code. And I did mention that that's something we do when we implement. That should already be set for you. If for some reason you have problems with that and you don't know where your code is, or you can contact Mike Collar at HUD and he can let you know. He's kind of our contact for all things related to the HUD export and any changes that get provided to us throughout the year. This is how you know that you don't have a HUD allocating agency code configured. Just like when you go to the HUD export utility and you create export, it will tell you that you don't have it. So none of you should see that. If you do, let us know, put in a support ticket. Jessica will let you know that this is what you're missing. The other thing, security privileges. If you don't have security privileges to run the HUD export, then you can't get to it. You have to have access to the utilities panel. Now, a lot of people worry about running like, oh, how many times can I run the HUD export utility? You can run the HUD export utility as many times as you want. It's not going to hurt anything. Running the HUD export utility does not change any of your data in ProLinkHFA. It is just a data dump that is relative to what HUD requires you to report on. So it is okay to run it as many times as you need. So let's talk about our data setup. Before we go into data setup, I always make this assumption that everybody understands that. Hold on a second, I want to hide my bookmark bar. This is what the HUD portal looks like when I talk about the HUD portal. And look, I just timed out of that. So let me go back in here. This may be something that some of you haven't used before, so I just want to briefly touch on it and kind of talk about what we at ProLink can help you with. Hang on a second. I have done a terrible job of trying to get back in here. Oh my goodness. Bear with me. I'll come back to that. So one of the biggest things that we try to explain to a lot of people, a lot of our agencies and clients, is that when you're doing the HUD export, you need to have that TCA deal and that property tied together. There's often a situation where if we have like, let's say, and I can think of one agency in particular, we implemented you in like 2019 or 2020, and we migrated data from like 2018, 2017. I feel like HUD might have been doing some audits because they were out there looking, sending emails to some of our agencies about data missing from before they were ProLinkers. And some of that was because we didn't have any associated TCA deals. So a lot of times it's going to depend on, do you have the TCA deal that goes with the portfolio property in order to have the most complete picture of information to send to HUD. So there are a few things that you can do to make sure that you're ready and you already have the TCA side of everything before you even onboard, or if you want to go through your existing data. The big one, like I said before, make sure the property associated is marked as primary. And otherwise, you're not going to see information on the HUD export page, and it's not going to populate where you need it to populate in the HUD export. On your building, on your TCA deal, having the BEN info, the address and information, This stuff is in the federal minimum set aside. That is required to populate the project file. And the project file is going to be projects that have their place in service date in the collection year. That means they went live there. Number of low income units is populated on TCA deal current stage, and also your tax exempt allocation type. And then your HUD PIN and your HUD ID are populated there as well. That's where you would put that. I think if you don't put a HUD PIN in, it pulls in bin data instead of saying that it's missing. So helping your future self, one of the ways that you could do this if in your agency is like every time a TCA deal gets advanced to stage 8609 at feasibility, just kind of have a workflow that sends to asset management saying, hey, or to your tax credit officer, let's make sure this stuff is populated before we onboard officially. So like you can have a checklist. You can have a list of things in the workflow to check that from the previous slide that I just showed. But again, help your future self have that data populated. Just make that part of your process. So when HUD export time comes around, you're not scrambling to be like, why is this not there? Why didn't we put it there? Just, kind of put that on your to-do list every time you onboard a property. I've brought this back up really quick. Just for everybody who has not seen the HUD portal before, this is what it looks like, and this is what the LIHTC data collection page looks like. We have access in order just to assist our agencies when you get stuck, because they have these great tools for, like, if you just want to test something, you can mark it as a test if you're having problems or getting errors. These fine folks have already finished their import. Everything was valid. So it feels like that's good to go. So they're done for the year. And I think most everybody who's come in here knows how to use that. But if you need help, we can come in here, and with some of our agencies that we work with, if you want us to help, I can go in here and test a file, look at the errors, and help. Jessica and I can help you resolve the errors if necessary. But that's why we have access to this. Also, when there's any documentation or updates, they usually put it out there. And I have to log in every 90 days like we all do to keep our accounts active. So I have that Outlook reminder to go, and that's when I kind of try to check any updates or information, so products aware of any changes we have to make. So this is where all the data we're talking about eventually goes. Just in case you were like, what on earth is this woman talking about? That's what I'm talking about. For portfolio property, you're going to want to have your place in service dates, your bins, and if you have a resyndication place in service date, you're going to want to put that on the property building as well, because that will filter up to your HUD export. Your LIHTC program for the collection year. If it's resyndication, you want to select that resyndication in your resyndication start date box. You also want to make sure, and this is like when you look at the missing information files, one of the biggest things you're going to see is like tenant event submission status is not submitted. So all your tenant events for the collection year need to be in submitted status. And you should have no missing requirements for your compliance reviews. They don't have to be finalized, but you just need to make sure any missing requirements aren't there. And the missing requirements are like things like you don't have a county on this building. Most of your missing requirements should get taken care of during the owner agent tenant import validation process. But sometimes if you have a property out there that you forgot about, that might trip you up and it might show up in your missing data. Entities, owner is defined and has some contact information, but I feel like there's a lot of people going to be cheering about this one thing. You don't need the phone number any longer as of 2025. I know there are many times where, it's like, oh, you got to go out and populate the phone number on the owner because that was showing up as a missing data issue. That was showing up when you would upload to HUD. It would be like, oh, you're missing this phone number. We don't have to worry about the phone number anymore. So everybody just applaud. One less thing to go with all the things we added. I know the HUD export giveth, the HUD export taketh away. Let's do a quick pop quiz. Let me go over here. I need to look at my notes because I believe we have some notes over here. This is kind of it's a quiz. It's not so much a poll question, but we're going to open it for 30 seconds. What determines the agency's HUD allocating agency code? We talked about this. Who is in charge of providing that code? So we'll give you about 30 seconds to answer this question, and then we'll show the results. Sam, I feel like we're close to 30 seconds. You can let me know.
Yes, go ahead and advance to the next slide. Oh, you'll need to click again.
HUD does assign the code. Correct. Thank you, everybody, for answering. Yeah, that's a code that HUD assigns. ProLink will enter the code for you, but we don't assign the code. We would go out and look at the HUD website that provides those codes that we have stored away somewhere. So that's where those come from. If we assign the codes, they would be more fun, but we don't. So that's the answer to that pop quiz. We have one more. True or false? The HUD export utility is located in the admin panel. So I will give you, whoops. Oh, look, sorry, I just messed that up. True or false? Hopefully nobody saw that. I got click happy, Sam. I'm so sorry. I was going to give a visual aid that was going to give away the answer anyway. I'm pretty sure the people who have used the HUD export know the answer to this. Okay, I think it's been 30 seconds, so let me know when you want me to advance, sir.
Yes, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide.
Yay! Everybody knew that. Yeah, it's utilities panel. That was a trick question. I'm not embarrassed about adding trick questions because I think trick questions are fun. All right, so now we're going to talk about finding our data in ProLink. So let me bring up my system again. Hopefully I haven't logged out of here. So here we are, HUD export utility. I ran this, I believe, yesterday. And then these are all the different files that you're gonna see. This one, these two, the first two, you don't upload those to HUD. These are the three that you worry about for HUD, just so you know. These are going to show you like some of your XML validation that's missing and then your missing data files. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bring this up because I think that's what we're talking about in this slide. But I just kind of want to see what we have here. Now, full disclaimer, disclosure, this is test data in our system. So some of it looks a little weird. Like we might have some data that doesn't look right because this is where we play around. Like we have some properties that have things they don't have a lot of information. So I will start at the bottom. We have things like county is invalid. You might have an example where a bin is invalid. You have to have a certain format for your bin, right? Then we have like federal rent assistant. It's over 8,000. I know these are kind of small. Same thing with gross rent per unit is over 8,000. This is kind of example of how we are validating and going through to find out that those new requirements are being met. Here we have total annual household income from all sources is invalid because it's over $1 million. One of the ones that has been there for a while that hasn't changed is the last 4 digits of the social are invalid. I have to have 4 digits. So these are the things you're going to see in the tenant XML validation file. Again, a lot of these, especially with the gross rent and the max income, those should show up as exceptions on your compliance exceptions on your compliance reviews. And those aren't going to prevent you from uploading your HUD data. those are the compliance exceptions are something you just have to work out with the owner agent. But if they're invalid or weird and they haven't been resolved, they're going to show up here. Like if for whatever reason the person that was the asset manager for Five Oaks Road went on a 6-month sabbatical and never resolved all the exceptions out here, this would be when whoever did the HUD export would be like, I have to go to Five Oaks Road, Unit 9A, and find out why this income is insane, and then get in touch with the owner agent to be like, did you just accidentally enter that incorrectly? So those are things you want to get fixed before you actually submit your tenant files. Because when you get a validation file with errors, you want to fix everything you can. Your goal is to not get that file because then you know all your data is good to go. Then we have the missing data file. This is similar, but this is basically you don't have the tenant event submitted. Um, and this is kind of more project related. Tenant events haven't been submitted. Place and service date isn't set for whatever reason. You don't have a county. And then the missing requirements on your compliance review. So your missing data file is going to show you that information. And again, this is the big one. It's like, well, that means it's impending. It has to be in submitted because I think HUD just wants to know you're done collecting data before you report on it. So when we go into where to find the data, I've kind of brought up the examples of some of these XML files that get generated with the HUD export to show you where they are. And this is something you can probably look through later and look at the document to find out what a lot of this is. Like we're going to talk about the HUD pen. You can create data views to bring back your HUD data and just look and see what's populated and what's not. But these are on, I think we said those are on Edit Deal. Then you can also, like on your property, find out to make sure your property has like all the unit information, address information. And you probably do as you go through and you're setting up your deals and your onboarding. I think making sure you have all your data correct and populated is something most everybody does. But every now and then you get one that's left behind, and that's okay. You can also do like a TCA building to make sure that you have, you know, address, city, state, which you're going to need the city and state. So this kind of shows you where that information comes from. Property information on your edit portfolio property main tab. Again, the HUD PIN and HUD ID come from your edit TCA deal. Then we have your edit TCA building where those live. And most of you are familiar with navigating with ProLinkHFA. I know there we have some of our newer clients on that might still be a little, I don't know where these are. This should be a good way to show you where it's at from these screenshots that we have. Because you can see I'm in a TCA deal. I go to the buildings, I click into the building, and this is where my edit TCA building information is. And again, you can always create some data views that kind of help you reconcile your HUD data every year and just make that part of your process. We talk about the property owner. Let's see. Oh, annual tax credit. What did I put on here? Sorry about that. Total TCA units on TCA deal. I think this is what we're talking about here. These would be like the low income units. When you bring up like your portfolio properties, you can find out who the owner is and what information you have. And again, now it's no big deal that we don't have the owner phone number. So that's one less thing, but we do want to have all this other stuff with the exception of the phone number. We don't have to have the owner direct phone anymore. That one's okay to be blank. So property owner info, that's going to live on your property entities page. And again, you do want to have a contact because they're going to need a name for the owner entity to contact. Phone number, no, but absolutely have a name. So in this case, there's a good chance like you're fine without the phone number, but you might forget to add the contact. So you just want to make sure that you have that contact to report on to the HUD project file. Other information that comes from like TCA current stage is the amount issued from the assigned cycle. Your number of low income units is going to come from here. And for most of the asset managers who I feel are tasked to do the HUD export, a lot of this should have been populated before it ever got to you, but there's nothing wrong with going back and verifying and finding out what. So in these screenshots, I have like if it's highlighted in kind of the green color, that comes from the property. If it's highlighted in yellow, that's coming from the TCA deal. We have some 8609 information when you have those issued where that will come from, basically saying like, hey, this is when this was allocated. Certain like nonprofit information, if you have rental assistance, just some of the more granular data that you might be reporting on in your TCA deals are going to show up in various places throughout the project file. Where's the other project file? Oh, if you have population served data, federal enhancements data, it comes from your edit property population data tab, and then your federal enhancements tab. I'm pointing at these. I know you can't see me, but I still point because apparently it makes me happy to do that. So then we have our no longer monitored file. Now this is going to be the projects, properties where the LIHTC compliance program's end date is in the collection year. In this screenshot, I have 2023, but we do have over here, if I want to bring up my no longer monitored file and our test data, let's see what we have. These are three of, oh, how many do I have in here? I don't know. These are the files that, or the properties that are no longer having data collected on. So when I would provide this to HUD, if I was you, we don't have a test account, but these are all the properties that, hey, and all the bins that ended their compliance period in the collection year. Now there is a chance that you don't have any of those properties and that when you create your HUD export, the file will generate, but you're going to open it and it's going to be empty. That's okay. If you don't have any data in that file, I don't think you have to submit it to HUD, but I think someone can correct me. Because if you do, it's just going to be blank. But on the other hand, at least they know that you checked. So I'm not sure what the correct answer for that one is. So another good thing we've talked about in previous years, when you have the tenant zip file, and that's the one that has all the XML files for all the tenant data that you're reporting onto HUD. You don't have to extract all the separate files and upload them separately. They now provide the option to upload the entire zip file. And when you go to the HUD upload page, this is directly from the HUD upload page. It tells you you can upload the zip files. But it has to be just .zip. It can't be zipx. All those details are there. So once you download that file as a zip file, just send it up. You don't have to extract it. You don't have to do it one by one. That was very exciting for me. To find that out on your behalf because I don't have to upload the files. And there's all, again, information. If you have any problems, get in touch with Mike Holler, who is apparently our HUD export superhero as per always, along with all the folks that work with him. So this gives you information, and that's where all your tenant events are going to be reported on. Before we take a break, the next thing we're going to get into is creating the export. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And then we will come back and continue our training. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, we're coming back at about 10 seconds, according to my Fitbit over here. I'll let everybody get comfy while we wrap up the rest of our training. I think we have about 40 minutes, and I think I can do it without talking at the speed of light, but we shall see. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about actually creating the HUD data export, which is probably the easiest part of this entire process. So let's do one more poll question before we get started. This will be the last poll question. When it comes to actually creating the HUD export, how many people at your agency work directly with a HUD export utility and uploading that data to HUD? 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 10. I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer. And Sam, I think we are wrapping up at 30 seconds. Let me know when you want me to show the results, please. Bam. Okay, small amount of people, usually a couple of people draw the short straw and are in charge of this every year. Excellent. The good thing about training people in your agency who don't actually work directly with the HUD export utility is that this lets them know where all the data comes from and how important the data is to populate as you go through your process. So thank you. All right, so pretty simple. Like most screens in ProLinkHFA, when you go out here into your HUD data export, it's going to tell you what fields are required. So when I bring up my HUD export, you can see here, file type is required, data collection year is required before you hit create export. Because if I hit create export, it is going to do that thing where it kindly yells at me to tell me that I have to enter a data collection year. And this kind of shows you every time you've exported, it will show the status, the year that you reported, when it was exported, who did it, any log messages that you have, and then your files will populate it over here to the right. You can work on them one by one or do them all. Depending on how much data you have, it could take a bit to process. It could take, up to like 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't have that many projects, it won't take that long. Like sometimes it's like, okay, well, I'm getting everything to work except for the tenant file. You might just want to go out and keep trying to do like the tenant data file to get rid of your tenant XML validation and whatnot. So you can do them all at one time. Usually the first time you do it, you do them all just to see what comes out, and then you go from there. So, but you have to select at least one type of file. We have different types of like statuses. Like under notification, it'll be like pending, completed, completed with errors, or canceled. Now, when you're in here and you're, let's bring this back up. When it's canceled for whatever reason, all that does is show that maybe this is not the ones that you uploaded. So the kind of canceling, if I want to like go over here and hit cancel selected, this may be just kind of like a data thing that you do. So, once you've gone through and you've created these through the reporting year, if you know this is the one that you finally used and this was the final data that you uploaded, you can mark all these other ones as canceled. So you know that this is the data that you provided to HUD. That's just kind of a FYI to help you keep track of what got uploaded and what didn't. Here's a note that you should get an email. Usually you do get an email. Whoever generated the export will receive an email. If you don't see it, check your spam folder. But if I'm going to run it, and I'm just going to do this real quick, I'll just do the project file to show you how I handle this because it's easier and it's important to know. Once I hit create export and it's doing that, I don't refresh, because if I refresh, it's going to run it again. So you're going to start seeing all these. So don't do that. If you're just hanging out and you think this is only going to take 5 minutes and I'm over here doing something else, you can just click this just go back over here and click this. When you click that, it's going to refresh the screen. So that's usually what I do when I'm working with the data because I don't want to have to check my email. That's just something else I have to do. Um, and again, your project data file and or projects no longer monitored could be empty if you do not have any buildings placed in service for the collection year, or you don't have a compliance program that has ended during the collection year. So HUD export files and our error resolution. So again, we have the tenant XML validation file, the missing data file. These are just informational. These are the actual files that do get uploaded to HUD, just in case. This just helps you make sure you have everything you need because the goal is to hopefully, by the time you get these files and you're uploading them through the HUD portal, they are complete. There's no errors. You're not missing anything. That is the goal. I know it's not perfect, but we are striving to make it better every year. So again, we talked briefly about this. The tenant XML validation file is going to show you properties and units that could generate errors when you upload them to HUD. Things that you want to look at before you start doing that. And when you look at these, some of them are kind of like, I don't know what that means. What is a pattern constraint? No matter, you don't need to know what that means. Basically, for here, last 4 digits, that just means it's only 3 digits. It should be 4. And right here in the notes, this kind of shows you these exceed the HUD limits. Like bin element is invalid. The bin format does not meet the HUD requirement. So there's a little bit of interpretation, but it's pretty much saying you need to go to this property, this bin, and that unit number and check out that field and see what's going on with that. We mentioned that earlier. Maybe an owner agent put some data incorrect and that was incorrect. Maybe you have a market unit with an insane amount of income accidentally marked as a low income unit. This just says, hey, go check this out and see what's going on because we don't think this is right. Um, like here for Salem Fields, we have unit A1 appears on that file, and the tenant paid rent is apparently way over $8,000. That would have come through with a compliance evaluation. That would have been kicked back for a low income unit saying, no, that's way too high. So there's a good chance that could have been resolved before you get to this. But again, it's just we have apparently multiple guardrails before you get to the point where you have to report that data to HUD. Your missing data file is going to show the properties that have a variety of issues. Your place and service data is missing. Usually you're going to know that when you run your evaluation on when you run a compliance review, because if you don't have a place and service date, that's going to be a missing requirement. So you should have already taken care of that. You may have a building that's missing it. The big one's going to be the tenant events have not been submitted. That just means they're impending. That tenant event status is impending and it just has to be fixed. Again, with like the county has not been set on the following building, that's going to be an error you get when you first evaluate. If you try to evaluate a bunch of tenant events and there's no county, it has no, or city or county or town, it has no way to know what income and rent limits it needs to check, right? So again, that's why we note this down here. Many of these will be caught during your compliance review evaluations. So that's good. So again, the project XML file data includes properties, the buildings, the place and service data on the property buildings fall within the year entered in the data collection year. So everybody right now during 2025, your data collection year will be 2024. So everything that we're talking about collecting for HUD happened last year. But if you had any properties that were placed in service, that's going to be what shows up in your project file. So let me kind of show this one that I just generated. And this is kind of showing you all the ones that got in our test environment that were created this year with all the information. We have 1, 2, 3, and I think I had one for resyndication. I want to talk about that. I believe this one is one that I resyndicated. So because it has the resyndication, it's going to show up there. Is that the one? It may have been a different one. I know I'm scrolling like crazy. This was the one that we have resyndicated. So if you've resyndicated that and the resyndication place and service date on the building has been populated, that's going to populate in your project data file too. as we made some updates last year to what resyndication is going to look like in the HUD export. No longer monitored. Again, the file shows all the properties. Their compliance program is LIHTC, and the compliance program end date is in the data collection year, which will be 2024. So you can always bring up, you can create a data view saying, hey, I need a list of all the properties with LIHTC, where the compliance end date is between January 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. Then you can have a data view that brings back what you can expect to see in your no longer monitored file. A tenant zip file. Again, this is the one that contains multiple files, but we can just upload that entire thing to HUD now, which is awesome. So when you upload it, it should be a zip. We generate it as a zip. This should go straight to your download folder. And then all you have to do is when I kind of open it, it kind of shows all the files. But you know what? If I'm going to go and upload it, all I have to do is go into my downloads and there's going to be a zip file. I'm just going to upload that to HUD because apparently they let us do that now, which I still think is really awesome, especially for a lot of you. And I've seen some of these agencies, you have like 30 tenant files that come through with that zip file because you have so many properties and tenants. So, yep, just upload the zip file. So if you want your HUD ID for your project's no longer monitored file, you can go to here to the database. I'm going to click on this and see where it takes us. I'm going to make sure that it's still, oh, it got moved. Good to know. It's a HUD page. I'm hoping it's still out there. Okay. Yeah, here's some information for the HUD LIHTC database that can show you any information. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with it as far as getting certain information like your HUD ID number that you may not have. But that is the database access for HUD in case you didn't know that. And I'm guessing a lot of you knew that way before I did. The HUD ID and HUD PIN and ProLink, we've talked about this, about where these are located. They are located here. The HUD ID is from, you can get that from a link on the previous slide, the one we went to, and it redirected us in that crazy database looking screen. The HUD PIN number is the number given to the property by your agency. That can be anything you want to make it. Some people will throw in like the HFA number for whatever reason. If it's blank, I think it does show up with a BEN number if you don't populate it. Some of the errors you might get when you're uploading your file to HUD. This is from the HUD portal. This is like what happens when you upload and you get the errors, which I don't have a good example of that because the files that we just looked at out there were clean. It's going to come up with a line number and a column number. And this is basically the line number in the file. Now, some of these you might continue to see. We know that the phone, we're going to have to about the phone. You're not going to see the phone opt ones anymore because we don't care about that. But a lot of these are just going to say specifically like one of BEN and BEN address is expected. That means you might not have a BEN and BEN address because when it says it starts with the element owner's representative, it's kind of like looking after that in the XML file. If you ever have any problems interpreting this, you have like just enter a support ticket and we can help you kind of like translate what these mean and what you need to do to get those fixed. I feel like a lot of our agencies are really good and on top of this. But again, since we only do this like once a year, everyone, including me, kind of forgets. And we have to be like, what did we do last year? And then it will come back to you. And then we can get through these and make sure the information gets uploaded to HUD as correctly as possible. So I think, wow, that is all I have, and that we're ending a lot earlier than I thought. I think we were worried that we were going to run out of time. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to bring up that I might have forgotten. I don't think so. Let's open up to Q&A. Kelly, do we have any questions that anybody has asked or wants to ask that you want me to bring up and address to everybody ahead?
None, Sarah. We don't have any.
Uh, do you have anything you think that we should talk about that we might have forgotten?
Um, there's nothing that's coming to my mind.
Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I just want to kind of reiterate that um, I'm going to go back over here just because I feel like I can't say this enough. If this is going to let me go back to the beginning. Um, Bear with me for just a second. This might be my favorite slide. This one, start from this slide. You don't want me to come up. I just want to talk about helping your future self. That was one of the things we talked about with like when you go back to, I think it was slide 24, when we're talking about when you know that you have your TCA deal associated to your property, which for, all your tax credit LIHTC properties and stuff, you should have that since that information works in concert together. It's like, every time that you're doing this, make it part of your process, make it part of an onboarding checklist. Like when it comes to asset management, hey, let's make sure that these fields are updated. So when we get to the once a year thing, we don't have to think about it because we already have that data out there and it's good to go. Um, I think the other thing I brought up is if you do get stuck, and I'm going to try to bring up the HUD portal again. Oh, see, it's going to make me sign in again. Because again, I kind of assume that everybody who works with HUD is aware of it. Where we get some of our information, the HUD Interagency Housing Alignment Portal, we do have the entire HUD, LIHTC data collection section. They have a lot of documentation out here and that they, tell you this is when it is due. They have instructions. They have more information. We have, I think this is the one. This is the one that we usually refer to. I think this is the one I was going to bring up anyway. When we talk about like, hey, you may wonder, how do you know to change this stuff? Why did this get changed and whatnot? That's because they provide this documentation that has the updates every year, and everything we do with all the schemas, whether it's the tenant schema or the project schema, we go by what they've updated here. And this is where a lot of the information and how we generate the information and put the information in the XMLs and stuff comes from this. So every time that you see something, and this is kind of also helpful with interpreting some of the errors you might get, you can go in here and kind of figure out what they're talking about. Like when we're talking about the last four SSN, I feel like I should make this a lot bigger. Come here. We talked about that. These are the values that are valid, and here's all the agency codes that are valid. This is a good place to find it if you don't know what your agency code, and I'm sure that somebody does. If we found out, we've gone to HUD to get it updated for you. But this is where a lot of the information stuff that we use comes from. We don't make this up. We take our directives from HUD and what they've changed from a data perspective. And then our super great product team makes and tests those changes and gives them to us in time for our HUD exports. So just in case you were curious about when do you and how you decide to do this, we use all the documentation, and we're lucky because my caller's always been great when we have questions. We've reached out to him about things for access just so we can help our agencies go through some of this stuff because you guys are really busy and you shouldn't have to spend 3 hours trying to figure out what an error is. And so we are here to help you. But yeah, just a little information about the HUD portal in case you didn't know all the stuff you could find out there. There's a lot of good information out there for you to check. So I think
Sarah,
that's it. Oh,
one thing that I might recommend or
okay.
just remind everybody, lots of you already know this, but just to reinforce it and for anybody who's new, any kind of communication that you all get from Mike Holler around this LIHTC data upload, if you can share that with us, that's super helpful for us because we're not on like the official mailing
I am.
list.
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Okay. Okay.
But that doesn't
Any
mean you might hear something we don't hear. It doesn't
right.
hurt to
Right.
share with us. Say, hey, this might be important.
Yeah, you're sometimes you're kind of our lifeline into kind of that HUD messaging. And so, anything that you share with us, it just lets us be on top of it and, maybe get changes made or maybe, ask questions to HUD that we need to or those types of things. And like I said, Many of you are already super great about sharing that information with us.
Yeah,
So just maybe
awesome.
for new folks, it's just real helpful.
It is because we don't want anything to slip through the cracks because we would
Yeah.
like to make this process as painless as possible.
Yeah. And
And
because, y'all have a deadline, right, for this data upload. And so the more we know, the sooner we know, the better we can help you meet those deadlines.
yeah, and another thing that I want to bring up, just because this was the first time it happened last year, if you get an email from someone who's going through and auditing their previous records and it's data that they're missing for prior to when you implemented the ProLink, you can still get in touch with us and we will help you reconcile that and figure out what they're asking for, what we need to give them, where it's at, because that can be kind of daunting. Because I think we got like a spreadsheet that had about like 30 things on it and the comments from HUD. And I think if somebody was like, I think I know what this means, but I'm not sure. And it was kind of like, ooh, scary. But yeah, we were able to go through and figure it out. We just had to kind of like fill in some missing data that wasn't migrated. But again, that's what our support team is here for, is to help you however we need to help you when it comes to things like that. And I think that's it, Kelly. I think Sam, Alexis, Kelly, we can let everybody go and give 20
Think
minutes of
so.
the day back.
Think so.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining. And I believe, Sam, is this going to be put on our YouTube channel when we're done?
Yes, it will.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all again. If you get stuck and you have any issues, please reach out to support. We will help you. So good luck with your HUD exports, and we'll do this again next year.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.